Throughout the year, manatees are injured or killed at sea by water traffic. The rehabilitation of injured manatee falls largely on the shoulders of a conservation group that treats them to be released back into the wild. It could be a long process, but it is certainly costly. The center is located up north, and it is manned mostly by volunteers. On a recent visit, News 5's Jose Sanchez met Twiggy, a calf that had been rescued and treated.
On the outskirts of Sartineja in Corzal Town is the home to Wildtracks, a conservation organization dedicated to the rescue and rehabilitation of manatees. The photo shows a tiny calf in the hand of Jamal Galves, a manatee associate who, along with another conservationist, rescued the calf called Twiggy over 3 years ago.
She was found around Hushner Key. They called us, say that there's this young manatee swimming around the key alone for some hours, and usually a mother wouldn't leave a calf for such a long period. So once she got there, monitored the situation and realized that she was alone, and that's why we caught her. And she had on her face she had scars. Maybe I've gotten hit by a small boat or something.
Well, Twiggy was rescued with the Coastal Zone group about 3.5 years ago, and very emaciated, dehydrated condition, a lot of cuts on her. She had been orphaned, her mother had been without, separated for at least several days for the manatee to be as emaciated and dehydrated as she was. The cuts on her face and flippers and tail probably resulted from coral cuts or possibly attacks from barracuda, but it looked as though she'd been passed through a cheese grater. She was a real struggle from the beginning to get going. We actually called her Twiggy after the skinny British model that just wanted to keep skinny, because it seemed as though Twiggy just never wanted to put on weight.
Injuries and deaths caused by mariners are common problems for manatees. Galves has regularly examined the carcasses of dead manatees.
2012 has been the worst year up to date. We had 22 deaths last year, 14 of which were as a result of watercraft collisions. Many were undetermined due to decomposition state, and many go unreported and unseen, so that the 22 is still not the exact amount. So as it is, 22 is a lot of manatee for us to have dead. With the population that we do have, it's a high population in this part of the world, but that number isn't a stable number now.
Rehabilitating a manatee is expensive work. To fund the project, Wildtracks does consulting work and receives donations from a manatee club in the U.S., Sea to Shore Alliance, and a group called Help We Supply the Milk.
Milk is our biggest single cost. A manatee consumes a huge amount of milk, a gallon or more a day of very concentrated milk. So that's our biggest single expense. We run fundraisers when we have to build new facilities, like some of the big concrete pools. We run a fundraiser specifically for that. And one way or another, work by.
What would be the approximate cost of, for example, a year for Twiggy?
Just in terms of food, it's about 7,000 Belize dollars a year, roughly, for one manatee. They vary from one to another depending on the size and the amount they consume, but roughly 7,000 Belize dollars. And that's more than is available in a country like Belize, which is why we have to have international partners. You can't raise that kind of amount of funding for an endangered species within country, so we're totally dependent on the foreign input like that.
The 3 years of Twiggy's rehabilitation took place in several tanks on the Wildtracks compound.
And it took a good 6 or 8 months before she finally started putting on weight and thriving and doing really well. She's been through the usual very intensive rehabilitation process over 3.5 years to get to the size and condition and with the skill set she needs to live back in the wild. So this is the final phase of that, ready for release now.
In terms of the actual rehabilitation, what processes, I notice you have 3 tanks, what do you actually do with these particular mammals?
Okay, when they first come in, the small calves go into the intensive care pool, and we'll have them under 24-hour observation for the first 2 or 3 days, recording the rate of respiration, whether they have any problems with buoyancy, whether they have any problems with their digestive tract, getting the baseline information against which we monitor their progress over the coming months. They're fed every 2 hours, day and night, with a milk formula for the first few months, and then every 3 hours, and then you start cutting out some of the night feed. So it's a very labour-intensive process over the first several months whilst they're little. We gradually move them into a larger pool during the day, back into their home nursery pool at night, and then gradually into bigger pools day and night as they move through the process. In the middle phase, they go into the lagoon enclosure, which is a fenced area of the lagoon, so they have natural water movements, tide, wave action, different temperatures in the shade, under the mangroves and so forth. And as they get bigger, we start taking them loose out into the lagoon out here, loose, and teach them about seagrass, how to eat seagrass, how to find seagrass, under supervision for the first few months, and then as they get bigger and more competent, they're out all day on their own, in readiness for looking after themselves back in the wild population. She's got all the skill sets she needs now to live within the system here, and the next phase is to just lead her out through the lagoon, out onto the coast, and then supervise and monitor her movements as she learns the geography of the coastline here and meets the wild population.
The volunteer crew then corners Twiggy in the water and raises her onto shore on a tarpaulin. While one person keeps her moisturized with buckets of water, her measurements such as her weight and distance between the eyes are taken. The rusted tag on Twiggy's tail is also clean.
We're very fortunate we've had support from, say, the Manatee Club, who's supplied us with a satellite transmitter that she's wearing, and the Sea to Shore have the belt that's fastened on her. With that transmitter, we can sit at the desk and see where she is at any one time, which is an amazing step forward. But also, during the first 2 or 3 months, we'll actually have a crew out on the coast physically overseeing her movements as well. So we'll have on the ground or on the sea information coming out about where she is, as well as the GPS satellite information that's coming in. And that'll enable us to see how she's using the seagrass beds, how she's interacting with the wild populations, how she's using the deeper water, the warmer water and the freshwater sources, which in turn will help inform us about how we go about strengthening the system for the next releases, because we have another one that should be released later on this year as well.
And like a proud father, Galves gives his grown child a pat, but must now allow that child to find its own path into the world.
It's always a very soothing feeling. It's ironic because it's sad and happy at the same moment. You get so close to these animals after they've been with you for such a long time, and you don't want them to leave, but it's a happy feeling inside knowing that you're putting all the work that you've gone to have came out to be a positive result, and you're putting back an animal that can contribute to the population that we have in Belize now, that we boast so much of now.
Twiggy is then lowered back into the water. One of the volunteers raises the gate to let her out, and within moments, she's gone. Later in the year, Wildtracks will release another rehabilitated manatee into the sea. Reporting for News 5, Jose Sanchez.
And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. That service comes courtesy of Belize Telemedia Limited. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us. And from all of us here at News 5, good night.